All right, so recently Tacoma has decided to follow Olympia's lead when it comes to dealing with the homeless situation. Now, I did a video about this and I don't know, I got lost in the mix because it was prior to my surgery and all of that. But I've noticed because I have to go through Hilltop quite often to do business, and I've noticed that along the planting strip on I forget the street. I think it could be Yakima. There has been a lot of tents where a lot of homeless people camp out. I would say at least a dozen tents are actually just right there on the side of the road. And it's within, I mean, between the sidewalk and the street, there's a pretty wide median and planting strip. And there has been a lot of tents there. And I hadn't seen that before. So I'm saying probably in the last 3 months, I've noticed this. And so I wasn't really sure why, but there's a park there called People's Park, and it also has a lot of homeless. Now, I haven't been to the park, but based on what, hold on. All right, the kid's always on the intercom. But anyway, so um, the park has gotten a lot of homeless people in it. So there has been a growing number of people in Tacoma that are homeless. Did a video talking about in Seattle how the homeless situation down in Soto has been pretty large because there's a lot of people parking in RVs. There's been a lot of people that have tents that are all along that area. There used to be down there along a lot of the shopping, the big, department stores downtown. You would see them. You'd see a lot of them in the International District under the bridge there for a pretty decent stretch. You would see probably 2 dozen or so tents and makeshift houses made all along that area. So you had that big section. You had another section as your, I forget the name of the road now, but pretty much right there in downtown Seattle, all along a lot of the department stores and things like that. Right, big area. There's also a small park there, so it was fairly large. Well, the city cracked down. The Seattle cracked down on that, and it dispersed a lot of people in different areas. It even pushed them farther up towards the north of the city, right? Because they wanted to address that. It didn't really do anything. I mean, it just dispersed people, but they came right back. It also spread the situation further out. Well, Tacoma, I think, has looked at a lot of what Seattle has done and done incorrectly. A lot of Seattle sets the tone for a lot of cities here, and a lot of cities either mimic what they do or do the direct opposite. And so Tacoma has been doing very well in addressing the homeless situation, considering. Now, people will argue they're not doing enough. Sure. But when you look at some of the things that they've done, they actually have a program in place where they actually have when you first go to some of these when you first go to the city to basically try to find housing, they have this huge giant awning. It looks like a massive covered greenhouse, and inside of that are tents. So you're protected from the outside elements because you have this big giant building there. It's not a real building, but it looks like a greenhouse with a big giant all-weather tarp on it. That's the first step. Second step is that they have these little modular homes. They're probably half the size. One is half the size of this man cave. So if you can imagine a single car garage and cutting that in half, that would be the size of one of the rooms. And they look like little tiny apartments. And there's a company in Washington that makes these modular buildings, and they just put in these panels, and it looks like a actual little building. So the city has that even. So that's the next step. So if you have a substance issue, the tents is where you kind of are under that tarp. I don't know the program in and out, but this is kind of the gist of it. Once you actually go through treatment, or you're on treatment, in treatment, and you're speaking with a caseworker and all that stuff, then you go to those little temporary housing type things. And then from that point, you're able to get a job. There's a lot of businesses in the city, especially downtown, that will hire people who are homeless and give them a chance and a shot. So those individuals then go to more permanent housing. So it's like a step-by-step process, right? So it's kind of saying like, hey, go along in this process, stay clean, do the things you're supposed to do. Whether you're, homeless today doesn't mean you're going to always be homeless, but it's up to you, right? So that's where they've actually done that. But the homeless situation has kind of crept up. And downtown, the city is really trying to make the area along Pacific Avenue really nice. Because as you leave downtown along Pacific Avenue, there's two areas that used to just be green spaces. They didn't have anything on them. Recently, Sound Transit put the big giant octopus there. It's a big metal art piece. The other side, they're just going to deck out with trees and make it look really nice, right? But where the octopus is, there used to be a large amount of homeless just out there. Broad daylight, you would see them. Even earlier this year, you would have saw that. And so the city is actually trying to push that away because they're trying to make Pacific Avenue, because that's going to be where the BRT line, they want that to look a lot better. Well, in Hilltop, so that kind of just pushed people in different directions because there's still not enough housing. Even though the city has done all these programs, there's not enough housing, even for the homeless. So the because of that, that kind of pushed people in other directions and inflamed the situation in Hilltop, which they had already had homelessness in Hilltop, obviously, but it kind of made it a little bit more of a problem. Now there are people saying, well, we don't know what to do because the city has passed ordinances where you can't pitch a tent in a park. And so that actually knocks a lot of people out. It's getting bad weather. I mean, now it's kind of just the rainy period where it's just damp all the time. It may not rain, but it's just damp. Either it's really foggy and wet because of the fog and the mist, or it will rain every now and again and stop, rain every now and again and stop. And because there's no sun, it has no chance to really dry things up. So it just stays wet and damp all the time. So even a tent, it would suck. And it's just a bad situation. And then you have the cold that comes in. Sorry, I got a little scratch. You have the cold that comes in because right there in Hilltop, you're on a hill, but I mean, the water is not far. So it can get kind of breezy, kind of cold. It's just cold in general this time of year. It just overall is bad. So these folks are like, if we get pushed out, where do we go? Well, Olympia has been doing this tiny home village thing for almost a year, and they have a caseworker assigned to that. And so basically, it's kind of that temporary step of getting into permanent housing. Now, I don't know if they're going to do this the same way that Tacoma has been doing it, where, the tent, then the little temporary homes, and then whatever, or if they're just going to say, if you're homeless, we're going to put you in the tents, and then we're going to work on the substance abuse issues while you're in there. Don't know. But the city now is going to take a prime area that they own in Hilltop and turn it into a tiny village, a tiny home village. So they're actually constructing this right now. Now, keep in mind, along this section of MLK, this is where the light rail expansion is going to happen. Right now, currently, they're tearing up the road all through MLK. I mean, you just can't get through most of the time. Excuse me. So they are going to put this in a prime spot along MLK. Now, when you look at these tiny village homes that they're going to construct, they look really nice. And the folks that are there have to make sure that they maintain the grounds, pick up trash. There's a whole schedule of everything they have to do. It has to look really, really nice. Also, what they're doing is making sure that there's a caseworker that's there all the time, or manager, what have you. And they're pretty much running this entire program and this project. And so they've done it in Olympia. It's done very well. And so they're hoping to do more. Now, the one in Olympia is a little bit bigger than the one that they're doing here in Tacoma, but Tacoma's trying to test this to see if this is going to work. If it does work, then what they want to do is eventually expand and have a much bigger area where they actually can do this. And so the hope is, and the goal is, to be able to try to tackle homelessness in this way. Now, the city has tried a lot of different things. They've got these folks that go around, these two guys. I know it's more than just two, but I know of these two guys that actually go all over the country, up and down from here to Portland and back, uh, to all these different conventions that have like the home builders conventions and stuff like that to find out what would be a good solution. Are there any cheaper options? Because what's been practiced in the past is just too expensive. It doesn't work. There's always problems. And then if you take the approach of Seattle, it just is a complete failure. So they're trying to figure out the best way, and they come up with this tiny village situation. Now, personally, I have a little bit of a concern in terms of where this is located. Hilltop, as it is, has a very bad reputation. It's trying to change that image and it's trying to lift itself out of that situation. There are still dicey areas of Hilltop, um, and most of it is definitely changing, but there's still a few areas that are kind of questionable. And putting this there, especially along where the light rail line is, I get it because you want to make sure people have access to transportation. I get that. But it is a little bit of cause of concern for me because then you end up having a problem. I've seen it over and over again in different places I've lived where the homeless folks will end up just being on those particular, like in Albuquerque, they used to have the D line. The D line was a bus route that went downtown and just circulated downtown. It was free. A lot of the homeless rode that, and a lot of people didn't want to ride it, and eventually that line went away because it was free. There was a lot of homeless shelters in downtown and substance centers in downtown Albuquerque, so they would just ride around in that loop because it was for free. And so it turned a lot of people off because you had some people that still had substance abuse issues. You had some people that were asking for money. There was a lot of just stuff. So it became a problem. That could potentially be an issue here too. Now, obviously, when the light rail line expands, it will actually charge. But again, it's one of those things where if it's not done right, it could pose a problem. There are a lot of people, tourists, use the Tacoma Link light rail line. And so you don't want this to look bad and bring Tacoma right and Hilltop right back to the spot where it was in terms of imagery and perception. So do I think it's a good idea? Yeah. Do I think that Hilltop's the best place for that? I don't know. Do I think that that lot could be used for things that could help boost the community a little bit more? Sure. I'm not saying bust people completely out of there or move people completely out of there. That's not what I'm saying. But I think right there on the main area, I think that we should do something a little bit different. That's just my personal opinion. But anyhow, Tacoma is trying to tackle the issue some. Now, obviously, it's not enough, but they are trying to find ways ahead in terms of trying to get on top of this homelessness situation so that it doesn't balloon to the problem that Seattle has. Anyhow, let me know what you think. Hope you guys liked this video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.